Let me take you back to 2014. That's when a biochemist named Dr. John Siebenpiper published a study that quietly changed the conversation about sweetness. He wasn't trying to scare anyone. He was trying to find a safe harbor. He and his team at the University of Toronto pooled together decades of research on sugar substitutes, hundreds of studies, and they came to a conclusion that should have made headlines everywhere. They found that replacing sugar with non-nutritive sweeteners generally leads to modest weight loss and improved blood sugar control. But there was a catch, a big one, because just a few years later, the same journals that published that safety data started publishing something else, something unsettling. In 2023, a study from the Cleveland Clinic appeared in Nature Medicine. It followed thousands of people for 3 years and found that those with the highest blood levels of a certain sugar alcohol, a sweetener found in everything from keto cookies to sugar-free gum, were nearly twice as likely to have a heart attack or stroke. And here is where this story gets personal for you, because that same sweetener is likely sitting in your kitchen right now. Not as the main ingredient on the front of the package, but buried in the fine print, hiding behind the words sugar-free and natural and zero guilt. This is not about fear. This is about information. And for anyone over 60, anyone managing their blood sugar, anyone who has been told to watch their weight, their A1C, their heart, this is about understanding the small choices that, repeated daily, build the architecture of your health. Think about that for a moment. Your health is not built in dramatic moments. It's not built in the doctor's office or the hospital bed. It's built in the quiet, unremarkable moments. The coffee you stir, the yogurt you sweeten, the snack you reach for when nobody is watching. Those moments, multiplied by days, multiplied by years, become your reality. So let's slow down. Let's look at the world of sweetness. Let's talk about the 3 sweeteners I genuinely trust for my patients and the 2 I'm watching closely. And by the end of this, you will know exactly how to sweeten your coffee, bake your cookies, and protect your health without ever feeling like you're missing out. But first, let me ask you a question. How do you take your coffee? Is it black, or do you reach for a packet, a spoonful, a drizzle? Type it in the comments. I want to know what you're putting into your body right now. Because that packet might be the key to everything. Let's start with the granddaddy of them all, honey. For generations, honey was the gift of the gods. It was medicine, it was currency, it was the sweet taste of nature itself. Ancient Egyptians used it to treat wounds. Ayurvedic practitioners prescribed it for coughs and colds. And because it feels ancient, because it comes from a hive and not a factory, we give it a pass. We treat it like a health food. We convince ourselves that something so natural couldn't possibly harm us. But biology doesn't care about poetry. 1 teaspoon of honey contains about 17 grams of sugar. 1 teaspoon of granulated white sugar has about 16. The difference is negligible. The glycemic index, the measure of how quickly a food raises blood sugar, is around 58 for honey and 65 for table sugar. In the body, they are nearly identical. Both send a glucose shockwave through your bloodstream within minutes. And if you are over 60, if your pancreas has been working overtime for decades, if your insulin sensitivity is not what it used to be, that glucose spike doesn't just fade away. It lingers. It pushes your A1C up a fraction of a point every single day. And that fraction, over time, becomes a whole number. That whole number becomes a diagnosis. That diagnosis becomes a life managed by medications and restrictions. That's the thing about chronic illness. It's not built in one dramatic event. It's built in teaspoons. Let me show you what I mean. If you add 1 teaspoon of sugar to your coffee 3 times a day, that's 3 teaspoons. Over a week, that's 21 teaspoons. Over a year, that's over 1,000 teaspoons. That's more than 10 pounds of pure, metabolically active sugar sliding into your system from coffee alone. 10 pounds, just from your morning ritual. Think about that weight, literally. Picture a 10-pound bag of sugar sitting on your counter. That's what you're pouring into your body every 12 months. If you switch to honey, thinking you're doing a good thing, you're essentially trading a Ford for a Chevrolet. It's the same car, same engine, same fuel consumption, and yet when my patients tell me they can't get their blood sugar down, and I ask them what they eat for breakfast, they say oatmeal with honey, or yogurt with honey, or toast with honey. And they say it with pride, like they are doing everything right. They are. They are doing what they were taught. But the science moved on, the world moved on, and the gentle wisdom passed down through generations, while beautiful, was simply never tested against the reality of modern metabolic disease. So if honey is out, what's in? That's where we enter the world of the plant-based sweeteners. And the first one I want you to know about is stevia. Stevia comes from a green plant native to South America. It's been used for centuries by the Guarani people of Paraguay. And the chemistry is fascinating. The sweet compounds in stevia, called steviol glycosides, are not broken down by your digestive system. They pass through you untouched. They provide 0 calories and 0 glycemic response. But there is a problem. Most people try stevia once, grimace at the bitter aftertaste, and never go back. They think they hate stevia, but they don't. They hate low-quality stevia, because stevia is 200 to 300 times sweeter than sugar. If you buy a cheap extract, it's filled with the wrong compounds, the ones that linger on your tongue like a chemical echo. But if you buy a high-purity isolated form, Reb A for example, that bitterness vanishes. You get the sweetness, the clarity, and the stability. It becomes something you can actually enjoy. I had a patient named Nora. She was 71. She told me she would rather have her coffee black than use stevia. I asked her to show me the box she was using. She pulled out a generic store brand. I told her to try a premium brand, just once. She came back a week later and said with a smile, "I was punishing myself for no reason. I can't believe. I drank bitter coffee for 3 years because I bought the wrong box." So stevia is number 1. Number 2 is monk fruit. Monk fruit is a little green melon from southern China. It has been used for 1,000 years, and it shares a similar superpower to stevia. The mogrosides in monk fruit don't spike blood sugar, but the taste is different. Monk fruit is smoother, rounder, more forgiving on the palate. It doesn't have that bitter finish. It doesn't fight you. It simply sweetens the way you want a sweetener to sweeten. However, and I mean this, you have to be careful. Because pure monk fruit is so sweet that it's almost impossible to use in its natural form. So manufacturers do something tricky. They blend it with a bulking agent, something that gives it a 1-to-1 crystalline texture. And that bulking agent is often erythritol. And that brings us to the paradox, the Jekyll and Hyde of the sweetener aisle. For generations, honey was the gift of the gods. It was medicine. It was currency. It was the sweet taste of nature itself. Ancient Egyptians used it to treat wounds. Ayurvedic practitioners prescribed it for coughs and cold. And because it feels ancient, because it comes from a hive and not a factory, we give it a pass. We treat it like a health food. We convince ourselves that something so natural couldn't possibly harm us. Erythritol. It's a sugar alcohol, and for years it was the darling of the keto and diabetic communities. It has a glycemic index of 0. It tastes like sugar. It works in baking. It seemed perfect. Too perfect, perhaps. And then the Cleveland Clinic study dropped. Here is what they found. In a cohort of over 4,000 people, those in the top quartile of erythritol blood levels had a significantly higher risk of major cardiovascular events, stroke, heart attack, death. Not just a little higher, doubled, twice the risk. And then they did a mechanistic study. They gave healthy volunteers an erythritol-sweetened drink and watched what happened to their platelets. Platelets are your blood's first responders. When you get a cut, they clump together to stop the bleeding. But in the presence of erythritol, they became hyperactive, more responsive, more likely to form unnecessary clots. That is not a definitive smoking gun, but it is a concerning signal. And it's not just erythritol. There's also xylitol, another sugar alcohol, often found in toothpaste and chewing gum. In June 2024, the European Heart Journal published a study showing similar risks. Xylitol seems to provoke that same platelet activity. It also happens to be lethally toxic to dogs, so if you have a pet, you need to be doubly careful. Even a single stick of xylitol-sweetened gum can be fatal to a small dog. Now, I want to be fair. I don't want you to panic. I don't want you to go home and purge your pantry. Because the FDA still classifies these as GRAS, generally recognized as safe. And there is nuance here. Your own body produces small amounts of erythritol as part of its natural metabolism, so a high blood level might be a marker of an underlying metabolic condition rather than solely from diet. The science is still being written, but I will say this. If you are at risk for heart disease, if you have had a stent, if you have high blood pressure, if you have any reason to be careful, having a conversation with your doctor about erythritol and xylitol is a wise move because the signal is strong enough to merit caution, so that's the first one to be careful with. Erythritol, the second, is sucralose, but not for the reason you think. I mean, yes, some studies have suggested it may alter insulin sensitivity and the gut microbiome, but the real issue with sucralose is context, because if you see a product labeled monk fruit sweetener in a yellow box, you might think you are buying pure monk fruit. You are not. Turn the box over, read the ingredients. It might say erythritol, monk fruit extract. Erythritol is the first ingredient. Sometimes it's 99% erythritol and 1% monk fruit. Your own body produces small amounts of erythritol as part of its natural metabolism, so a high blood level might be a marker of an underlying metabolic condition rather than solely from diet. The science is still being written. You think you are making the safe choice. You think you are picking from the three I trust, but you are actually picking the one I asked you to be careful with. That deception, whether intentional or not, is costing people their health. That's why the third sweetener, allulose, is so fascinating. Allulose is a rare sugar. It occurs naturally in figs, raisins, and maple syrup, but in tiny amounts. It tastes remarkably like sugar. It has about 70% of the sweetness, but it behaves like a ghost in your body. It is not metabolized for energy. It is cleared by the kidneys, not the liver. It does not spike blood sugar. In fact, there are studies showing that allulose may actually blunt the glucose spike from a meal. One study from 2021, published in BMJ Open Diabetes Research and Care, found that when people consumed allulose alongside a glucose load, their insulin levels were significantly lower. It seems to promote the release of GLP-1, the same hormone that some of the newer diabetes drugs target. That doesn't mean allulose is a drug. It's not. But it is a gentle, supportive nudge in the right direction, a whisper, not a shout. And it bakes, it browns, it caramelizes. Unlike stevia and monk fruit, which are notoriously difficult to bake with, allulose creates the same texture, the same browning, the same mouthfeel as sugar. If you are a baker, allulose is your friend. It makes cookies that look like cookies. It makes cakes that rise. It makes caramel that glistens. It makes desserts that taste like they came from a pastry shop, not a laboratory. But a word of caution. Allulose is new to the market. We don't have decades of data, and in large amounts, it can cause digestive upset, gas, bloating, diarrhea, because your body doesn't absorb it, so it travels to your colon where it ferments. Start small. Listen to your body. Give your gut time to adjust. I had another patient. His name was James, 74. He had been chasing a good sugar substitute for 15 years. He had a drawer full of half-empty bags. He tried allulose on my recommendation, and he called me 3 days later. He said, "I don't know how to describe it. It's just normal. It tastes like I'm not using a substitute at all." That is the highest praise. Now let's address the elephant in the room, the psychology. Because even if you use the perfect sweetener, there is still a trap. It's called compensatory behavior. You have a sugar-free cookie, which is still made of white flour and hydrogenated oil. You have a zero-calorie sweetener in your coffee, and then you let yourself have a larger portion of pasta at dinner. You think you've earned it. But your body doesn't work that way. The sugar-free cookie still spikes your insulin because of the flour. The larger portion still overburdens your metabolic pathways. The sweetener is just one variable. I had a patient named Patricia, 69. She switched to monk fruit and was so proud of herself, but her A1C didn't budge. We looked at her diet and discovered she had started adding an extra slice of toast in the morning because, in her mind, she had saved calories elsewhere. She didn't realize she had just swapped one problem for another. The psychological offset completely erased the physiological gain. So let me give you a simple, 4-step framework. Step 1. Read the ingredient list, not the front of the box. The front is marketing, the back is reality. Make it a habit. It takes 10 seconds. Those 10 seconds could save your health. Step 2. Match the sweetener to the task. For coffee and tea, use stevia or monk fruit. Pure extracts, not bulked with erythritol. For baking, reach for allulose. Step 3. If you are at cardiovascular risk, talk to your doctor. Ask specifically about erythritol and xylitol. It's a short conversation, but it's worth having. Step 4. Don't use the sweetener as a permission slip. Keep your portions reasonable. Keep your eye on the whole meal. Now, let me leave you with this. For the first time in your life, you have tools that actually work. You have sweeteners that don't raise your blood sugar. You have choices that don't force you to choose between taste and health. That is a gift. But with great choice comes great responsibility. You have to be the person who reads the label, who experiments, who adjusts, who watches how their body responds. You have to be the person who doesn't settle for the good enough option, but reaches for the best possible option. I'd love to know, of the 3 sweeteners I trust, stevia, monk fruit, and allulose, which one are you most excited to try, and what is the one thing you're taking away from this conversation? Write it in the comments. And if you know someone who is still using honey, who thinks sugar-free means safe, send them this. It might change their morning coffee tomorrow. This is Dr. Claire Whitmore. Thank you for spending this time with me. Keep making those small, intentional, powerful choices. They add up. And I will see you in the next one.